Robin Brown. I was agent and managing director for Welbeck until I retired 7 years ago. Well, I came here in '82 as an assistant to the agent who was the manager, if you like, of the estate. Within 2 years I married a tenant farmer's daughter, and I stayed here ever since. So I've been part of the Welbeck community for that length of time, 40 odd years. When I came here, Welbeck had interests in 11 colleges, of which 9 were still working. So that was in Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire coalfield. And by the time I'd retired, they'd all gone. So, I came here when it was king coal. Much of the communities were obviously based upon and around collieries. And yeah, by the time I'd finished, every pit that we had an interest in had closed. So I got involved in anything from claims for subsidence, when the mines had been working underground, damaging the surface. I got involved with the colliery, the coal board's lands department on leases of collieries and leases of pit tips. And then when the collieries started closing, redeveloping those as either housing or industrial sites, or putting the colliery tips back to some sort of natural regeneration, really.
Could you tell me what mines Welbeck had interest in? I've been trying to sort that out, and
Well, Welbeck owned a very large estate in Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, underlying which is one of the large coalfields, the Notts and Derby's coalfield. And so the way the family here used that asset was they would rent or lease the coal, the actual seam of coal, to a colliery company to work, together with the right to occupy a bit of surface, which is where the pit head was, where the headstocks, all that sort of thing, and sometimes where the colliery houses were. And so Welbeck, it wasn't just one colliery, we had interests in, I won't remember them all, but Whitwell, Creswell, Mansfield, Sherwood, Clipston, Hucknall, two collieries at Hucknall, Kirkby and Ashfield. Have I already said Mansfield? And Sherwood. The Benting colliery site at Sutton. So I think there were 11 colliery sites in all, but basically what the subject of the lease were these vast coal reserves, underground coal reserves, with the right to occupy bits of surface in various places from which to access it. And then that was changed in 1938 and 46 when the coal was nationalised, but the actual surface was not. So although Welbeck had no direct interest in the coal following nationalisation, it still retained the surface rights. So when the colliery shut, for example at Bolsover, we developed a business park, along in that case with the district council. They were very, very helpful, as was Mansfield District Council.
Okay. Did you have to deal with the miners' strike? Did that impact your job?
Did it impact my job? I'm not sure. We lived in the middle of the miners' strike. We were in the centre of it, in the sense that the Derbyshire coal pits, so Whitwell, Bolsover, Creswell, were on strike. The Nottinghamshire pits at Mansfield and Sherwood, Clipston and Welbeck were not on strike. this was the sort of front line between the NUM strike and the Union of Democratic Mine Workers who stayed working. So, yeah, the whole area was affected by the strike. In some ways, perhaps still is. For example, one evening, some pickets were stopped on the road at Cockney, and to try to avoid the police road block, they were nipping across the estate and all down the back roads, and yeah, the little things in the context of the whole strike. But yeah, the communities here were hugely affected, and because of our links and because we live here, we were part of that.
Okay, my name is Derek Adlam. I trained as a classical pianist, moved into the early music world, became a musical instrument maker. That eventually brought me to Welbeck to take up a workshop owned by the Harley Foundation on the Welbeck estate, and then I became involved with the charity itself. Now I am old and retired. The most positive aspect of those societies was the sense of loyalty within those communities. They supported, if people were in trouble, they would support. That was both in terms of personal relationships and formal organisation. So there were these strong bonds between the families and the individuals of those communities, and they were remarkably strong. The negative aspect, which really, while mining flourished, that really did not cause great difficulty, because those communities were really quite prosperous. But there is another aspect, and this is where, in fact, the Welbeck estate certainly became involved, or individuals of the estate became involved. Mining is almost by definition an extremely dangerous occupation. And so there were mining disasters locally, and of course there was illness through a consequence of mining, particularly in the rather more distant past, where the consequences of breathing in dust and so on, it wasn't recognized so much. But there was physical injury at all. And Welbeck was quite notable, although Welbeck was not running those mines on the estate in which they were the owners. The family, the owners of Welbeck, supported the mining community strongly, and particularly through establishment of such as the what is now called Portland College, which was effectively a support organisation for miners who had been injured. Duchess Winifred Portland, who died in 1954, strongly supported, both financially and just by attendance, those particular organisations. So there was a great deal of medical support and social support given by the family at a time before the National Health Organization and things like that. And so, there are many instances of particular miners requiring support, being sent off to, the best surgeons in London and so on. So whenever there was trouble, Duchess Winifred and her descendants were there to give support. They were gaining, of course, but they gave support of a kind that was not available nationally.
Interesting.
That actually, Portland College survives. It flourishes, it still exists, it survives mainly for people with disabilities. so no longer connected directly with mining, but those with learning difficulties, other disabilities. There is a flourishing college still in existence called the Portland College. As it moved away, as the driver moved energy, provision moved away from water to coal, air pollution and all the rest was a direct consequence. Experienced to a degree here in what remained basically a rural county, but in other places such as Staffordshire and so on, the Black Country, huge areas were just covered with soot and factories and were dreadful, dreadful places to live in. There was a reaction to this with the great philanthropists like Salt and so on, where they built model towns and made proper provision in every way for the people who worked. But that was exceptional. I would claim that there were elements of that on the Welbeck estate, because there are two model villages built for miners, one at Cresswell and one at Bolsover. And they're really rather handsome, they're interesting. And again, Duchess Winifred took a very close personal interest in the way those were set up. It's almost embarrassing to think of the way she would go round to the miners' wives, telling them how they should do their housekeeping efficiently. This is a duchess who had never done housekeeping in her life, ever, but she meant well. And she also actually delivered a great deal of help when help was needed.